Hello and welcome to our last video in our linear equations and graphing unit. This video is going to be on writing equations, so it's going to involve a bunch of different things that we've seen or done in previous videos or lessons. So in previous videos we've found the slope, we've had to find points, and we've moved it into our slope point form, and we've also had to have done some rearranging in order to get some other types of equations. So our steps, you're first going to find a slope, then you're going to find a point, and it doesn't matter which order you do these two, so the order of those doesn't matter. Then step 3, you're going to substitute into our slope point form. The reason we substitute into this form is because we just found a slope and we just found a point, so that makes it the easiest. And then once you have that form, you can rearrange it into any other form that they ask for. Usually a lot of the time we ask for general form. So in the first example it says, write the equation of the line in general form and sketch the graph. So I'm just going to remind you of what general form was. That was the form where everything was lined up nicely on one side. So it was something that looked like this: ax plus by plus c equals 0. And if you recall, a, b, and c, those are just different numbers. But a, this one can't be negative, and it also can't be a fraction. So that was kind of the only one that had some requirements for it. So we're going to come up with our equation, and then we're going to sketch it, and we're given this information for number 1. So the y-intercept is 2, and the x-intercept is 6. So they basically just gave us 2 points. So I'm going to write that out. We got the y-intercept that occurred at 2, so that's when y equals 2. And that's when x is 0. So it's at 0 and 2. So there's our first point. And then we are also given this other point, the x-intercept, and that is at 6. So that's when x equals 6. So if x is 6, then y is 0. The other point is always at 0 for an intercept. Now whenever we had points, what we always did with points is we wanted to label them. So I'm going to call this one x1, y1, and then I'm going to call this one x2, y2. And the reason we did that was because if we did that, then we could look to our formula sheet, and you're going to see those on your formula sheet, and then it's going to kind of lead you into the next step. So on our formula sheet, we have something that looks like this. We have m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. And that m, if you remember, m just stood for slope. So this is going to help us find the slope where these 2 points go through. So let's plug everything in. y2 is a 0, and we got minus right there. And then y1 is a 2 divided by x2 is a 6, and then minus x1 is a 0. And then we'll simplify this. So on the top we're just going to get negative 2. In the bottom, 6 minus 0, we just get 6. So we can simplify this. We can divide the top and the bottom, the numerator and the denominator, by 2. So you're going to get negative 1 over 3. So we now have a slope, and the only other thing we needed was a point. And I actually have 2 points. I have one here and one here. So it doesn't matter which one I pick. You can pick either one you want. You're still going to end up getting the same answer. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our slope point form. And that was this right here. It was y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, and then that piece there was in brackets. So now we can just fill into this. I'm going to use this point just because it has smaller numbers, and I've already actually labeled it x1, y1. So I got y minus, y1 is a 2, that was up top there. M we just found, it was negative 1/3. Then we have x minus, and then x1 was a 0 up top there. So we've got that. That's our slope point form, but we want to get it into the general form. So we got to move everything all into one side and then get rid of the fraction or negative in front of the x. So I am going to move everything over to the right-hand side. So when these things move over, their signs are going to change. So I'm going to have 0 over here, then I'm going to have negative 1/3. X minus 0 is just x, so I'm just going to put an x there. And when this y comes over, it's going to be a negative y, and when the negative 2 comes over, it's going to be positive 2. It would be the same thing as minusing a y and adding a 2 to both sides, as some of you guys like doing that more, you can do that instead. You're still going to get the same thing. You're going to have a negative y and a positive 2 over on the right. So now that I've gotten that, it's almost in our general form. We got the ax, the b, y, and the c. So it's ax, b, it's a minus 1 in front there, y, and then the c is just a plus 2. But remember, we can't have a fraction or a negative in front of our x. So we have to multiply by whatever's in that denominator. So I'm going to multiply by a negative and a 3, so that'll cancel the negative and the 3. And I got to do that with every term. So the 0 gets multiplied by negative 3. This y is going to get multiplied by negative 3. And this 2 will get multiplied by negative 3. Everything gets multiplied by negative 3. So these two negatives will cancel here, and these 3's will also cancel. And as well, this negative and this negative are going to cancel, so that'll be positive. So on the left, negative 3 times 0, that's just 0. Then I had everything canceling here. There's just a 1 and an x. So all I have is a 1x, so I can just write an x, that's 1x. And then next it was positive because the negatives canceled. And there's a 3 times a y, so that's 3y. And then at the last part there, we got a plus 2 times a negative 3, that's negative 6. So that is our general form. The last thing we need to do now is just graph this. And we were already given 2 points. So I'm just going to plot those 2 points, and then I'm going to be able to draw a line through the 2 points, and then I'll have my graph. So my first one is at 0 and 2, so that's going to be right here. That's the y-intercept. It crosses at 2. And then our x-intercept is at 6 and 0. So we're over 6, and we're not anything up or down. So we're just right there. And then we can just take our ruler, set it on, and then draw our line. And then don't forget your arrows at the end of your line. So number 1 is now complete. We can look at number 2 next. And we got some different information for this one. So it says it passes through the point 5 and negative 1. So they give me a point. I'm going to label it x1, y1. Always label your points. And then it says it is perpendicular to 4x plus y minus 1 equals 0. So we got to find a point and we got to find a slope. Now we already got a point, so I'm done with the point. I just got to find a slope. So I know that the line that I want is perpendicular to this line. And remember, if something is perpendicular, that meant it was going to have a slope that was a negative reciprocal. And a negative reciprocal was just taking the opposite sign, so changing the sign, and then reciprocal was you flipped it. So I'm going to find the slope of this and then take the negative reciprocal of that. So let's start with 4x plus y minus 1, and we're going to find the slope of this. Now the best form to change this into is going to be our slope-intercept form, because that one is the easiest. So I'm going to write that on the side. To find slope, convert to slope-intercept form. So we're going to convert it into slope-intercept form, and if you remember what that was, it was y equals mx plus b. So basically, just get the y on one side, and then we'll be able to figure out what the slope is. The slope is the m right there. So we're going to bring this down, and I'll just write it down here first, and then after we'll start rearranging. So I want to get the y all by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this 4x. I'm going to have to subtract 4x from both sides. And I got to get rid of that minus 1. So I'm going to have to add 1 to both sides. So these are going to cancel on the left. So the only thing I have is y and then equals. And on the right, I got minus 4x plus a 1. So the term in front of the x, that is our slope. So I can see that right there. That is our slope, but we want the slope that is perpendicular to this. So we have to take the negative reciprocal. So take negative reciprocal. So negative 4 is going to change into the opposite sign. It's going to go positive, and then we're going to flip it. So it was 4 over 1. Now it's going to be 1 over 4. So now I've got my slope. And I got a point. I was given that right up top here, 5 and negative 1. So I'm going to put everything into my slope point form. So that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 in brackets. Then we're going to plug everything into this. So we're going to have y minus y1 we labeled up top there. That was the negative 1. So negative 1 equals, and then m we just found, it was 1 over 4. That's our slope. So maybe I'll just label that. That is m. And then we have x minus, and then x1 up top. That is a 5. And then we're just going to start to simplify and rearrange this. So these two negatives I'm going to make into a plus. So I got y plus 1. And then on the right hand side, because we're trying to get it into general form, I am going to distribute this 1/4 into the brackets. So I'm going to have 1/4 times x, so that's 1/4 x. And then 1/4 times -5, that's -5 over 4. If you find it easier, you can put your 5 over 1 and multiply numerator with numerator and denominator with denominator. So 1 times 5 is 5, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Just going to move my work up here because I'm running out of space. So we want to get it into that general form, so we're going to move everything all onto one side. So I'm going to minus a y from both sides, so minus a y, and then I'm also going to subtract a 1 and then subtract a 1. And then my y's are going to cancel and my 1's are going to cancel. So now I have nothing on the left, and then equals, and then there was 1/4 x, and then there was a minus y, and then minus 5 over 4, and then minus a 1. And now again we have a fraction in front of our x, so we got to get rid of that fraction. So to do that, we can just multiply by 4 on all of our terms, multiply by 4, and that's going to actually get rid of this fraction as well, so that's going to work out nice. And even the 0 has to get multiplied by 4. So these ones, it's going to cancel. This one, it's going to cancel. And what we get out, we got 0 on the left. And then we just have an x. That's the only thing that didn't cancel there. And then it was minus a 4 times a y, so that's minus 4y. And then next we had a minus 5 because the 4 is canceled. So that's minus 5. And then minus 1 times 4, that's just minus 4. So I can actually put these two terms together. So my last step, I'm just going to have 0 equals x minus 4y, and then a minus 5 and a minus 4, that's just minus 9. So that is our general form. Last thing we got to do is just give a quick sketch of this. We've got to graph it. So the things that we're going to need a point. So I can use the point that we were given. So we're going to use this, 5 and -1. And we also need another point if we had one, but we didn't have another point. Or we could also use the slope. And remember, our slope was right there. So we're going to first plot our point, and that was at 5 and -1. So I'm going to go over to 5, that's right here, and then down 1 because it's -1. So there's our first point. And then we're going to use our slope to get to the next point. And our slope is right here, 1 over 4. So that's a rise of 1 and then a run of 4. So I'm going to rise 1 and then run over 4. But that takes me off my graph. There would be a point about there. If that ever happens, this happened in another example, you just kind of go backwards. So instead of going up and to the right, you go down and to the left. So I'm going to go down 1, and then I'm going to go over to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that is where a point will be. And then we can take our ruler and draw our line. And then at the end of your line, just make sure you got your arrows on there. Okay, so again, if you're going to be hopping off your graph and then you can't do it very accurately, just hop the exact opposite, go down instead, and then to the left. Just do everything kind of backwards. So that finishes up number 2. Now we got just one last example. So this is number 3. And our information for this one, it says it has the same x-intercept as this linear equation, and it's going to be parallel to this one. So if it is parallel, remember parallel means that it's going to have the same slope. So it has the exact same slope. So first let's maybe use this one, and let's find, it said it had the same x-intercept. So that's going to give us a point. And remember, x-intercepts, those occur when y equals 0. So let's find this x-intercept. So I got x-intercept. This is when y is going to equal 0. So essentially I'm going to take this equation and I'm just going to change the y to be a 0. So it was 2x minus 3y minus 6 equals 0. And then I'm going to change the y into a 0. So here I got 3 times y, but now it's a 0. Everything else stays the same, and then I'm going to simplify and solve this. So 3 times 0, that's 0, so that's going to be gone. So all I have left is a 2x minus 6 equals 0. And then to solve this, just get the x by itself. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. The 6's will cancel. Then we have 2x equals just a 6 over here. And then to get rid of that 2 in front of the x, it's being multiplied by 2. We will divide by 2 and then divide by 2. The 2's will cancel. So we just have an x on the left, and then 6 divided by 2 on the right, that's just 3. So when y is 0, x is 3. So that just gave us out this point. When x is 3, y is 0. And I'm going to label it x1, y1. So we've now gotten a point. Now we just need a slope, and we can get that from this one over here. It's got the exact same slope as that, so we just got to find the slope of that. And remember, to find slope, it's easiest to just change it into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to just write it down here at the bottom, and then we're going to start to find the slope. So 2x minus 3y minus 9 equals 0. So we're going to try to get it to be y equals and then the mx plus b. So I'm first going to subtract 2x from both sides, and then I will add a 9 to get rid of the 9 as well. So the 9's will cancel and these 2x's will cancel. So I just have minus 3y equals, then there's a minus 2x plus a 9. Then to get rid of this negative 3 in front of the y, we just divide by a negative 3, but then we also have to do that on the other side. So these get divided by a negative 3, and then these ones will cancel over here on the left. So now there's only a y on the left, that's what we wanted. And then I can see a negative 2 over a negative 3 right here. Those two negatives will cancel, so I'll just have a 2 over 3, and then x, and then a positive 9 divided by a negative 3, that's just negative 3. So again, the number in front of the x, that is your slope. So I can see my slope, which we call m, is 2 over 3. So now that I have a slope and I have a point, I can put this into my slope point form. So that was y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, and then we just plug everything into this. So y minus y1 up top here, that was 0. So 0 equals, and then m, so m, that was right here, 2 over 3. Then we had x minus, and then x1, we labeled that, that was our point, that was a 3. So now we got everything filled in. Now we can just start to get it into the general form that it asked to. So move everything all into one side, right? General, just like the army, lined up nicely. So y minus 0 on the left, y minus 0 is just y. So I'm just going to simplify that first. And then to move the y over to the right, or to get rid of it, I'm going to have to subtract a y, and then subtract a y. So these y's cancel. Then I just have nothing over here. I got 0. On the right, I actually forgot to write my brackets, so don't forget your brackets in there. So we got 2/3 times an x minus 3, and then we're going to subtract a y. So let's actually distribute this 2/3 in. So 2/3 times an x is 2/3 x, and then 2/3 times negative 3, I'm just going to write that out. So we got 2/3 times a negative 3, and I'm going to put it over 1 just because it's going to make our multiplication easy. And then we had a minus y. So we got 0 on the left still, 2 over 3x, and then to multiply these ones, just multiply top with top and bottom with bottom, or if you ever see the same number in top and bottom, then you can cancel. So these two in the numerator and then the denominator, we can cancel those out. So I can see it's just 2 over a 1, and 2 over 1 is just a 2. So I just have a 2, and then there's a minus y. And then our general form, we can't have the fraction in front of the x, and we also like to have the y in second place. So first I'm just going to move the y over. So we got 2/3 x, and then it's going to be minus y, and then plus 2. So when you move the y just over to here, it didn't move to the other side, so it doesn't change sign. If you just move it over to somewhere still on this same side, it still keeps the same sign, so it's still minus y. So very last thing, we got to get rid of this 3 in the denominator, so we'll just multiply by 3, multiply by 3, multiply by 3. So 3's will cancel right there. Then I have 0 equals, there's just a 2x left. And then we got minus 3 times y, that's minus 3y. And then plus 2 times 3, that's just a 6. So that is our general form. And then we're going to scroll up and then just finish this off with the graph. So to graph it, we're going to need either 2 points or a point and a slope. And in this case, we have a point and a slope. So we got this point, 3 and 0. We can plot that. So we're going to be 3 over, 0 up or down. So 3 and 0. And then our slope was right here. So we're going to rise 2 and then run 3. So let's just put that on there. Rise 2, 1, 2, and then run 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we get another point. And then we can set our ruler on and then draw our line. And then lastly, just put on our arrows. So that was our last example. Our homework that we're going to be doing today for this one actually is just a handout. So we got this writing equations handout that you guys will be getting.